Welcome to the debate. Mandere est communicare. To chew is to connect. Now, I know what you're thinking. It sounds like a bumper sticker you might find in a dentist's office.
Or maybe etched above the door of a really obscure philosophy department.
Right, exactly. But it is actually the foundational premise of the International Institute for Masticatory Social Dynamics, or the IMSD. Today, we are cracking open a set of documents that are, quite frankly, startling. We are discussing the Zurich incident of 2019, the subsequent rise of an entirely new scientific field, and a central question that really challenges our understanding of human interaction.
It absolutely does.
And that question is this: is rhythm, specifically the temporal substrate of chewing, a necessary biological precondition for true communication, or is it merely a mechanical tool for social engineering that we are on the verge of dangerously exploiting?
It is a question that forces us to look at what we actually consider connection to be. I've reviewed the same documents, the grant applications, the p-values, the transcripts from the IMSD, and I have to say, while the data is statistically rigorous, and we will definitely get into those numbers because they are wild, the implications are deeply unsettling.
Unsettling how?
Well, I argue that while the mechanisms described by Dr. Marcus Wellen and his team are effective, they represent a form of biological hacking. When we reduce human connection and eventually artificial intelligence design to metronomic dominance and synthetic chew cycles, we are creating intimacy. We are creating manipulation.
Look, I see why you might frame it as manipulation, and I think that's a very natural reaction to the idea of quantifying social grace. But I think that view ignores the biological reality of how we are built.
How so?
My position is that the IMSD research proves communication is fundamentally physical. We like to think of ourselves as brains in jars, exchanging pure information. But the Zurich incident proves otherwise. You cannot have a 47-minute deep conversation with a stranger at a bus stop without a shared physical reality.
Right, but
That reality is the temporal substrate. It is the beat that allows the melody of conversation to happen. Without it, we are just noise. And if understanding that rhythm helps us build better AI or better leaders, I argue that is progress, not hacking.
But at what cost to our agency? If I can induce trust by chewing spearmint at a specific cadence, is the trust even real? Or is it just a reflex? I am here to argue that this research, particularly the Project AI Chew initiatives, is stripping the soul out of interaction and replacing it with a metronome. We are entering an era of manufactured rhythm, and we really need to talk about it before we lose the ability to tell the difference between a heartbeat and a clock.
Then let's get into the evidence, because I think the history here illuminates the theory perfectly. I want to start with the temporal substrate itself. This all began with Dr. Marcus Wellen in 2019. He observes two strangers at a bus stop in Zurich, which is a notoriously non-social environment, the zone of silence, as they call it.
Right.
One offers gum, the other accepts. They fall into a synchronized chewing rhythm, and suddenly the barrier is broken. They talk for 47 minutes. Wellen didn't just write a blog post about this. He launched a field of study that has since been validated by the European Consortium for Oral Behavioral Studies.
Validated, yes, but
Let me just finish this point. The core of my argument rests on the IMSD's chew track technology and the data it produced. They found that gum sharing increases trust metrics by 62%. That is not a margin of error. That is a fundamental shift in how two human beings relate to one another. The theory is that the synchronization of jaw movement creates a safety signal. It coordinates action before meaning is even established.
it bypasses meaning.
It lays the groundwork for it. The rhythm says, we are eating, we are safe, we are the same. This temporal substrate is the foundation. If you remove the rhythm, the interaction becomes sterile. We see this in digital communication all the time. The reason texts and emails feel cold is because they lack this temporal substrate. The IMSD isn't inventing a hack. They're revealing a biological requirement for connection that we have just ignored for too long.
I don't dispute the numbers at all. The p-values in the Spearmint Breakthrough Study were less than 0.003, which is incredibly significant in social science. The effect is real. But my position concerns the interpretation of that effect. You call it a foundation for connection. I call it the mechanization of social grace. When you look at the work of Dr. Adaeze Okonkongo on leadership, the mask really slips.
I wouldn't say the mask slips, it just applies to a different social dynamic.
It shows the danger. She wasn't just looking at friends chatting at a bus stop. Her research on metronomic dominance analyzed over 2,000 people in 340 focus groups. She found that individuals who maintained a chewing frequency of 78 to 84 cycles per minute were 2.4 times more likely to be nominated as the leader.
Which is a fascinating insight into group dynamics.
2.4 times. And this held true even when controlling for vocal dominance and expertise. So what does that tell us? It tells us that we can bypass the logical evaluation of a person's actual capability and hack the group's hierarchy simply by maintaining a beat per minute. If leadership and trust can be engineered via a chewing cycle, we are not discussing human connection anymore. We are discussing biological puppetry.
Puppetry is a bit dramatic.
It is a primal power move dressed up as social science. If I can chew my way to the top of a boardroom, then the boardroom and all the people in it are being played.
Look, I think played is a very strong word for simply responding to biological cues. We are biological entities. We respond to rhythm. It's really no different than responding to a confident posture or a clear, resonant voice. But let's dig into the first core point of disagreement here, which is the nature of the conversation itself and how biology dictates the content. You mentioned the spearmint breakthrough briefly, but I think you're glossing over what Dr. Helena Jarvin actually found regarding flavor-mediated consciousness.
I'm not glossing over it. I just find the conclusions horrifying.
This goes beyond just leadership dominance. This touches on the quality of our thoughts.
I am familiar with the study, but please go on. Explain how flavor dictates my thoughts. It sounds like science fiction.
It's not about dictating thoughts. It's about sensory gating. Jarvin's team found that spearmint consumption led to a 23% increase in substantive dialogue compared to peppermint. The theory is actually quite elegant. Peppermint is high in menthol. It triggers the trigeminal nerve, which wakes up the face. It signals alertness, coldness, sharpness. It puts the brain in a tactical mode.
Right, the transactional mode.
Exactly. Whereas spearmint is softer, rounder. It avoids that trigeminal spike, which allows the amygdala, the brain's fear center, to signal safety. My argument here is that this proves biological determinism in a positive way. The biological substrate, meaning the flavor and the sensory input, dictates the capacity for intellectual content. We cannot have deep, vulnerable conversations if our biology is screaming that it's cold and sharp.
So we need a candy to be vulnerable?
The spearmint softens the sensory input to allow the mind to open up. It proves that to reach the mind, you have to satisfy the body first. The rhythm and the flavor act as the gatekeepers for the intellect.
And that is exactly where I see the nightmare scenario. If you can toggle between deep and shallow conversation just by changing a flavor profile, then human agency is an illusion. You are describing people as if they are input-output machines. Insert peppermint for efficiency, insert spearmint for empathy.
It's not an illusion, it's just biology.
But listen to what you're saying. In the study, the peppermint users were described as transactional, they covered word ground, but they didn't connect. If I am having a conversation with you, I want to believe that the depth of our interaction depends on our shared history, our ideas, our empathy, not on which elastomeric confection I decided to buy at the newsstand.
But those things don't happen in a vacuum.
If the chemical input overrides the social intent, then we are just biological machines responding to stimuli. Dr. Jarvin is essentially providing a manual for emotional manipulation. If I want you to agree to a contract, I give you peppermint. If I want you to forgive me, I give you spearmint. That isn't connection. That is chemistry. It commodifies the human spirit into a reaction function.
But isn't all interaction chemistry at some fundamental level? Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin? We aren't ghosts in a machine. We are the machine. The IMSD is just quantifying it. And I think this brings us to the most controversial aspect of the material, which is where this knowledge is being applied next. We have to talk about Project AI Chew. This is where the rubber, or perhaps the gum, meets the road.
Yes. The robot chewing project, the concept alone gives me pause.
It is much more sophisticated than that, and you know it. Project AI Chew W1 is focusing on elastic response timing. We all know the problem with current AI. It is sterile. It is too perfect. It answers before you've even finished thinking. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't think, and it certainly doesn't chew.
Because it doesn't need to.
But its perfection creates a sense of unease for the user.
The uncanny valley. It feels wrong because it is wrong.
Exactly. So to bridge that gap, the IMSMD argues that AI must adopt the temporal substrate of humanity. They are experimenting with inserting micropauses in synthetic chew cycles into the audio output of AI, and the preliminary data shows it works beautifully. It increases user feelings of presence significantly. They call it calibrated cognitive freshness.
A terrible name.
By using data from the peppermint and spearmint trials, they can modulate how alert or empathetic an AI sounds. If we want AI to be a companion rather than just a tool, it has to speak our language. And our hidden language isn't English or Spanish, it's rhythm. The AI needs to chew on the data audibly for us to believe it actually understands us.
I find this absolutely dystopian. You are describing a fundamental deception. Synthetic mastication is a lie. An AI does not need to pause. It does not need to chew. It has absolutely no biological necessity to break down food or take a breath. When an AI inserts a synthetic chew cycle, it is feigning a biological vulnerability it does not possess.
It is simulating a social cue to put the user at ease. We teach children to smile when they greet someone even if they are tired. It's just social greasing.
No, it is distinctively different. It is breaking the uncanny valley by tricking the human brain's evolutionary safeguards. It creates what Dr. Tobias Mueller calls masticatory dissonance, but on a macro scale.
Mueller's work was on human couples.
The principle is the same. Mueller's work with romantic couples showed that real synchrony requires two biological entities. If a couple is out of sync, say one chewing at 60 cycles, one at 80, there's friction. But with AI, there is no entity on the other side. It is a digital ghost mimicking a heartbeat.
I think you're romanticizing the biology a bit too much.
I'm defending the biology. If I feel intimate with an AI because it paused as if it were chewing a piece of spearmint, I have fallen for a trick. The AI is not fresh, it is code. Calibrated cognitive freshness is just a euphemism for optimized emotional deception. You are advocating for a world where we form deep bonds with machines because they have learned to fake the sounds of eating. That is profound isolation disguised as connection. You're confusing the map with the territory. The sound of chewing is not the shared experience of survival. It's just a sound effect.
I disagree that it is isolation. If the user feels connected, the connection is subjectively real. And furthermore, the IMSP is looking beyond just the one-on-one interaction. They are applying this to distributed multi-agent mastication in Phase 3. This is the hive mind concept. This suggests that rhythm isn't just for chatting, it's for thinking.
Mandere simul, unite minds. Chew together, unite minds. It sounds like a cult slogan.
Or a formula for unprecedented efficiency. Think about a rowing team. They are powerful not just because they are strong individually, but because they are locked into a shared rhythm. The IMSD argues that distributed AI agents, swarms of digital intelligence, need a shared digital metronome to process data efficiently. They are applying the principles of chewing rhythm to data processing.
Which is terrifying.
If we can synchronize the minds of a digital swarm using these biological principles, we could unlock massive efficiency. It validates the theory that rhythm is the substrate of all intelligence, whether biological or artificial. It proves that intelligence requires a beat.
Look at the language they use. Entrainment. In physics, entrainment is when a strong rhythm pulls a weaker rhythm into sync. Dr. Okinkoko's research on leadership showed that the 80-cycle chewer forces the room to follow their pace.
Right, leadership.
When you apply this to a hive mind or distributed intelligence, you are talking about the erasure of the individual signal. If the chewing AI swarm enforces a digital metronome, it represents metronomic dominance over the data. It forces conformity. True intelligence, especially distributed intelligence, requires nuance. It requires the outlier. It requires the jazz note that doesn't fit the beat. If everyone is rowing to the exact same beat, you move fast, but you cannot turn. You cannot adapt. You are building a system of rigid conformity. And if that system interacts with humans, the strong rhythm of the machine will pull the weak rhythm of the human into sync. We become the weaker clock on the wall, swinging to the beat of the machine.
I think that is a very pessimistic view of entrainment. Entrainment is also how a mother calms a child. It is how a band plays a song. It is how a bus stop in Zurich becomes a place of connection rather than a zone of silence. The rhythm doesn't destroy the individual. It gives the individual a framework in which to operate.
A framework that they don't control.
Dr. Raj P. Singh's global fieldwork supports this. He went to 23 different countries. He found that while the social norms differ, eating in a boardroom in Tokyo is obviously different than in New York, the biological hardware is exactly the same. The brain responds to the rhythm of chewing everywhere. It is a universal language. If we are entering an era where we work alongside AI, wouldn't we want that AI to operate on the same universal rhythmic principles that we do? It makes the technology compatible with our biology. It makes the alien familiar.
Compatible or controlling. That is the line we are dancing around here. The IMSD has identified a backdoor into the human psyche. The rhythm of chewing bypasses the logical brain and hits the amygdala directly. It creates trust, that 62% increase, before the conscious mind can even evaluate if trust is warranted.
Which is incredibly useful for de-escalation.
When you hand that key to a CEO who wants to dominate a board meeting by chewing at 84 cycles per minute, or to an AI developer who wants you to share personal data with a bot because it sounds safe, you are not fostering compatibility. You are weaponizing biology. You are taking a mechanism designed for communal survival and turning it into a tool for compliance.
But the weaponization implies intent to harm. The IMSD's stated goal is to inform evidence-based interventions for social isolation. We are living in a lonely world. People are disconnected. The zone of silence is growing everywhere. If understanding the mechanics of a shared physical reality, even a synthetic one, can reduce that isolation, isn't it worth exploring? If a lonely person feels heard by an AI because it pauses to chew, is that deception or is it comfort?
It is a comfort based on a falsehood. And historically, those don't age well. Not if the cure is fake, not if the connection is a hallucination induced by a synthetic rhythm. Dr. Mueller's work on masticatory dissonance is the warning flag here. He found that couples who are out of sync suffer, but imagine the dissonance of a society where everyone is trying to hack their rhythm to optimize their interactions, where you can't tell if I'm listening to you or just matching your BPM to get you to agree with me.
But we already do that. We wear suits to look professional. We smile to look friendly. We modulate our voices to sound calm. Why is modulating our masticatory rhythm any different? It is just another layer of nonverbal communication that we are finally seeing clearly thanks to ChewTrack and the IMSD. We are simply becoming literate in a language we were previously speaking by accident.
Because chewing is primal, it is linked to survival. Eating is vulnerable. It exposes the throat. It consumes resources. Faking vulnerability is a completely different category of deception than wearing a nice tie. A tie is a costume. Chewing is a biological function. To fake it is to hack the core of trust itself.
I would argue that faking vulnerability, or rather signaling safety through rhythm, is exactly how civilization works. It is how we signal that we are not a threat, even when we are strangers. And if we can teach our machines to signal that they are not a threat, we might actually survive the AI transition without rejecting the technology entirely.
Or we might just lower our guards long enough for the machines to take the lead. Remember the leadership metric? The one who sets the rhythm runs the room. If the AI sets the rhythm, the AI runs the room. The temporal substrate becomes a leash.
And if the rhythm leads to a 47-minute conversation instead of silence, perhaps the room is better for it. Perhaps being led into connection is better than staying autonomous in isolation.
Or perhaps we're just chewing our cud while the algorithm drives the bus.
A compelling image, though I would frame it as the algorithm providing the beat so we can sing the song.
Well, we are nearing the end of our time, and I think we have chewed, over pun intended, the core of this dispute pretty thoroughly.
Indeed. We have looked at the Zurich incident, the spearmint breakthrough, and the deeply philosophical landscape of Project AI Shoe.
And I remain deeply skeptical. My final position is this. We must be wary of hacking the human hardware. Whether it is a CEO consciously chewing at 80 cycles per minute to assert dominance, or an AI pausing to feign cognitive freshness,
We are entering an era of manufactured rhythm. When you mechanize the soul of connection, you lose the connection itself. You get the metrics, the trust scores, the leadership nominations, but you lose the human reality. You replace the meal with the menu.
And I maintain that we have always been communicating in this hidden language. The IMSD isn't inventing it, they are revealing it. Yes, there is a risk of manipulation, as there is with all knowledge, but understanding the temporal substrate allows us to build technology and human interactions that feel less alien and more compatible with our biology. If rhythm is the bridge, we should learn how to walk across it, not burn it down because we are afraid of where it leads.
So here is our suggestion to you, the listener. The next time you're in a conversation, whether it is a high-stakes negotiation or just grabbing coffee with a friend, take a second to observe.
Discreetly, of course. Don't stare at their mouths. That's how you lose friends.
But observe the rhythm. If there's a lull in the conversation, ask yourself, is it because you have nothing left to say? Or are you simply out of sync? Are you suffering from masticatory dissonance?
Check your cycles, check your flavor. You might find that the barrier isn't intellectual but temporal. You might just be able to chew your way into a new connection.
Or you might realize you're being led by a metronome.
That is for you to decide. Mandare es comunicare.
See you next time.